Last year, when the Darusman report was tabled at the UNHRC sessions, many countries, including Germany, said that this report should be taken into account, and the content of this report, the government has to take note seriously. However, when the LLRC report was tabled, this focus suddenly shifted. What is the reason behind this, Mr. Ambassador?
No, I don't think so. Let me make 2 points. I told you how well we think about the LLRC report, right? Now, there is one caveat I would need to make, and that is on the question of accountability of possible war crimes committed. The LLRC report has very little in it. So, as we said earlier in this interview, we believe that sooner or later this is something which should be addressed for the well-being of the society itself, and that's where the Darusman report, as you call it, the UN panel report, comes into the scene, because it is quite vocal on this issue. So this is why one can very logically welcome both reports. But I think that the important thing about the LLRC report is that one of the criticisms the Sri Lankan government always uttered regarding the UN panel report, saying that it's a foreign report, it's ingerence, they never talk to anybody here. Take that criticism, we take careful note of that. Now, concerning the LLRC, that obviously doesn't hold true at all, because they had dozens and hundreds of interviews in the country, they traveled the country, were only Sri Lankans who were participating. So, I mean, this kind of, immunizes this report against a fair share of criticism the UN panel report received from the government.
Mr. Ambassador, 3 years following the end of the conflict, isn't it too early to exert pressure on the Sri Lankan government on reconciliation and accountability? Winning peace, as you did mention before, takes time. What are your views on this?
First of all, I don't like your expression of exerting pressure, because we consider Sri Lanka a friendly country to Germany, and among friends, exerting pressure is not exactly what we do. What do you all do then? What do we do is that among friends we give our recommendations, we give our opinions, and I totally agree with you. 3 years is a very short time. One has to be measured concerning the expectations one can have. That's why, once again, we don't expect that 3 years after the war everything's fine. But I think what we, and that's what's even more important, what the people of Sri Lanka can expect, is that there is a clear and unmistakable, deep direction of reconciliation taken. And I feel that quite a number of ingredients of such a direction are still missing. Take, for example, the last recommendation of the Sri Lankan LLRC report of having an element of joint commemoration of the suffering inflicted to all people in the country at the occasion of the National Day. That's not something very complicated to do, to say to your Tamil brothers and sisters, I know you too suffered a lot. We Sinhalese suffered, we Muslims suffered, you Tamils suffered. Let's recognize this mutual suffering, and on that build a better future. I find that's a very deep and meaningful and easy to do gesture. Why not do that?
The Sri Lankan government has taken very positive steps towards moving to reconciliation, accountability, fulfilling the needs of the international community as well. Example, the release of Sarath Fonseca, the former army commander who was imprisoned, who was labeled as a political prisoner by the US government for many years. How does the German government react to this?
What was important concerning Mr. Fonseca for my government was always that whatever legal proceedings there are against him, they take place, within the rule of law. If there is enough evidence to sentence him for something and the procedure is correct, it's not my government who would interfere in your judicial process. So that was our issue. And I think this is all the more important when we are talking about the major political opponent of the sitting president. So now he's free, and obviously has also some health issues. We wish him well. That's surely a positive step for the political climate. But let me tell you one thing I'm a bit concerned about.
Tell me, Mr. Ambassador.
Now, this word of traitor, I find, is being used quite abusively in the public discourse here. People who criticize the government, may they be right or wrong, are not automatically traitors to the country, because the government and the country are two different things. The country stays, governments change in a democracy. And that's why every time I hear in the public discourse, and even more so by government politicians, somebody being called a traitor, be it somebody from the civil society, a human rights defender, a journalist, that really gets at me. Because if you start using this kind of discourse, that's really dangerous for democracy, because democracy is built on dissent.
Mr. Ambassador, you have been very critical about media freedom in Sri Lanka. I want to know, what is your position on media freedom in the country?
It might surprise you, but I would say two things. Number one, Sri Lanka's media freedom is better than its international reputation. The Free Media Index put it among the 10 or 20 worst countries concerning media freedom. I really don't think that is true. There are so many critical op-eds in the newspapers, so better than its international reputation. But, point number two, I think it's not as good as it should and can be. You have such a proud tradition of free journalism, big editing and publishing houses. So why is it that journalists are called traitors if they voice dissenting opinions? Why is it that the Secretary of the Mass Media Ministry says that it's the job of media to defend the government agenda? Hello? Of course it's not. It's the job of media to watch whether the government is doing a good job. So here I think I would, as a personal wish, I would like to see Sri Lanka live up to its proud tradition of free media.
Mr. Ambassador, the British High Commissioner in Sri Lanka recently made a statement about the military presence in the north. Yesterday we saw the manner in which a TNA parliamentarian also coming up with the same sentiment, stating that there is a huge presence of military in the north. You have been visiting the north in and out, Mr. Ambassador. I want to know, what are your recommendations, what are your observations on this?
Well, I think my British colleague John Rankin was spot on right. I think that is an issue we need to talk about. Now, since this statement, there have been a number of the statement of my British colleague, there have been a number of public statements of Sri Lankan military and government officials saying that the number of military men posted in the north has been significantly reduced. Some spokespeople speak of 15,000, others say 20,000. So that, if that, that's what they say, that's a good movement, and I welcome that. But the question is, what do the soldiers do in the north? And when I travel to the north, and you're right to say I do that quite extensively, what I often hear from families is that the interference of the soldiers into their daily lives is still too strong. For example, there is this unofficial rule that whenever there are more than 10, 15 people gathering for a birthday or a funeral, this needs to be signaled to the army beforehand. I wonder whether that is really necessary and whether that is in line with the strategy of winning hearts and minds.